the Admiral Bradley from this whole boat strike thing that Pete Hegseth that committed those war crimes over went and spoke privately, so it wasn't televised. We didn't get a chance to see everything that he showed and told senators and representatives about what it is that happened. Showed them the video of this double tap boat strike that everyone's been talking about, and out and emerged the one propaganda spokesperson for MAGA. In this particular instance, it was like, "Put me in, coach." Tom Cotton.
I want to thank Admiral Bradley and General Kane for coming to brief about the strikes on September 2nd, which were righteous strikes. These are narco-terrorists who are trafficking drugs that are destined for the United States to kill thousands of Arkansans and millions of Americans. The first strike, the second strike, and the third and the fourth strike on September 2nd were entirely lawful and needful, and they were exactly what we would expect our military commanders to do.
What exactly did you see in terms of the video of the second strike? Were there survivors?
I saw two survivors trying to flip a boat loaded with drugs bound for the United States back over so they could stay in the fight. And potentially, given all the context we heard, of other narco-terrorist boats in the area coming to their aid to recover their cargo and recover those narco-terrorists. And just like you would blow up a boat off of the Somali coast or the Yemeni coast, and you'd come back and strike it again if it still had terrorists and it still had explosives or missiles, Admiral Bradley and Secretary Hegseth did exactly what we would expect them to do.
Tom Cotton is the lead on this from MAGA to talk about what is it they saw from these boat strikes. Apparently, these two that they hit the double tap with were trying to flip the boat back over, in the middle of the ocean. And then they had all these viable ways of, gaining some kind of an approach to the United States of America with, parts of a boat. Let's talk to a Democrat that also saw some of this information and was asked specifically about what is that Tom Cotton said that he saw.
At the time of the strike, you could clearly see the two people on the boat.
And they weren't calling, radioing in, anything like that?
I mean, if they had a radio device on them, it must have been really small, because it sure wasn't apparent from looking at the video, and they certainly did not appear to be signaling to anybody.
Can you square that with Senator Tom Cotton saying that they were trying to flip a boat that was loaded with drugs over, that was bound for the United States? Is that what you saw?
That's patently ridiculous. I mean,
that's not true in your view.
Gosh, Admiral Bradley didn't even pretend that was the case. There was no way they were turning this boat back over. The boat was completely disabled, and Admiral Bradley admitted that. It was drifting with the current. It was going to go wherever the current was going to take them. And I don't know, I didn't see all 48 minutes between the first and second strike, maybe for the first 10, but it appears that the boat was split at least in half. I mean, there was this tiny little bit of the bow that was still, capsized. They weren't trying to flip anything over, first of all. Second of all, there is the claim that the drugs still could have been there. There's no real evidence of that. You see the first strike, boat's on fire, flips over, maybe in that tiny portion of the boat. But that's speculation, and it certainly wasn't clear from the video.
Outside of Representative Adam Smith there talking about how it's impossible to do it, just imagine this. This is the level of superhero, supervillain type of images that these Republicans want people to imagine. So these guys got blown up, flipped upside down, their boat's capsized, and it's in pieces. So therefore, they're trying to flip it back over in the middle of the ocean after being bombed like this, flip it back over with this superhuman strength, get back in it and somehow enable it to go moving again. Man, what weak-ass bombs the United States of America has. This is weird. You bomb this smaller boat, blow it up, and then these super villains can come back and do it because they've got drugs pumping through their system. The fear, the scare tactics, and what is they want you to believe these folks can do is, it's over the top. Tom Cotton wasn't even done with his story times and talking about what is that he believed and what is that he saw.
Well, I didn't see anything disturbing about it. What's disturbing to me is that millions of Americans have died from drugs being run to America by these cartels. What's gratifying to me is that the president has made the decision, finally, after decades of letting it happen, that we're going to take the battle to them. And we're going to continue to strike these boats until cartels learn their lesson that their drugs are no longer coming to America.
Did a military JAG say that the second and follow-on strikes were all lawful?
Yes, look, this is not like a firefight in some cave in Afghanistan that had 3 people. this was witnessed by literally hundreds of uniformed and civilian personnel at the Pentagon, at Fort Bragg, at other installations. Dozens of them were lawyers. Everybody was watching. Everybody had seen the intelligence and the legal basis leading up to these strikes. Everyone was present during it, and that continues to be the case. There's been no change in the guidance or the order that the Secretary has given to our troopers. And in subsequent strikes, there is an example where survivors actually were shipwrecked and distressed and not trying to continue on their mission. And they were treated, as they should be, as non-combatants. They were picked up by U.S. forces.
This is the approach people should always have when listening to politicians, specifically people who are trying to defend something that happened. Tom Cotton and the Republican Party have this approach. You start by pushing the fear tactics, make sure people have this level of fear in their heart. That's probably like the major one you go with. So now you've got your audience like shaking. Now, I'm scared now, Tom. What do I do? Next step is to then say, we're badasses though, and us murdering these people potentially with these war crimes, that's us protecting you so that those fears that I just pumped into you that are based in these two guys flipping the boat back over is us quelling those fears that I just gave you. After we quell those fears that I just gave you, let me then go start talking about how in other instances, we then saved the people after we bombed these boats. And then whoever was left floating, we did save them. So why didn't you do it this time? What's different about this one? So if that's your standard, that you've saved people before the way you're supposed to in those situations, and you didn't this time, that I feel like the next follow-up question is, what was different here, bro? These guys were super terrorists. Maybe that's the next term they're going to come with. Super terrorists. They're going to say they got off the boat and they had like, some kind of emblem on their chest and we got really afraid. So we, bombed them again. Here's an instance. I want to show you guys just what I was saying. It's those types of terms to scare people more. And in order to do that, you have to use these super scary terms that are made up like, narco terrorists.
These are narco terrorists, foreign designated terrorist organizations who are bringing drugs to our shores that have killed millions of Americans and thousands of Afghans. If you think these strikes are justified and righteous, as I do, and I want them to continue, then of course the second strike, when you have two survivors who are trying to flip their boat back over and continue on their mission, remain in the battle. Unlike a subsequent strike in which there was no such indication, and they were what's called distressed or shipwrecked under the laws of the sea and the law of armed conflict. And our military went out and picked them up.
Is it your expectation that these strikes will continue?
It's my expectation and my deep hope that these strikes will continue.
Tom Cotton's on board with more war crimes. Again, narco terrorists, narco terrorists. I want you guys to notice how many times it gets said by anybody else you hear talking about this. Once they get cornered, once they need to explain themselves, it goes back to rhetoric. It goes back to fixing your mind to think whatever it is that you were just questioning, throw that out of your brain. I'm not going to address it. Go back to the fear. Because once the fear strikes back in your brain, you stop thinking and we can go back to doing our murderous process and policies of killing people without telling you who they were, what they were doing. And it's just the conclusions are, trust us, bro. So that narco terrorist line, you don't have to listen to me tell you that the narco terrorist line is something that they came up with in order to scare people. Here's a conservative. This is him talking about the narco terrorism lines.
Look, narco-terrorist is not a legal term. It's a political term, and using that political term does not justify.
But if they're labeled terrorists by the administration, doesn't that indeed indicate that they are?
No. Only if they're engaged in violence can the military kill them. The military can't
But it seems violent if they're coming here with drugs that could kill Americans. Is that not so?
Well, they're 1,500 miles from the United States in a speedboat with a 50-mile distance. It's inconceivable it could reach the United States.
The facts just never match up. Again, narco-terrorism is a word that they're using. And this anchor here was asking, well, can't the president just call anyone a terrorist and then start killing them? That's fascism. Again, they keep denying it, but you keep describing it. Can't the president of the United States designate anyone that he and the rest of his cronies want to call terrorists and then therefore claim you can kill them? Why would that be legal? Here's some information actually from CNN about what has happened, because we're hearing these accounts from some of these guys. Here's a little bit more of it. So these 2 men that were killed as they were floating, holding on to that capsized boat in that secondary strike in early September didn't appear to have radio or other communication devices, is what the top military official overseeing the strike told lawmakers on Thursday. So listen, Admiral Bradley said that these guys didn't appear to have radio or communication devices. Admiral Bradley, the guy that Pete Hegseth and the rest of these Republicans said, hey, why are you attacking our warfighters? Admiral Bradley is one of the smartest, most well-decorated military guys that we've got. Trust me, you can listen to him. We're listening to him. And he said that they didn't have, radio devices to do all this stuff. As far back as September, defense officials have been quietly pushing back on criticism that killing the 2 survivors amounted to war crime, as we know, that they were legitimate targets because they appeared to be radioing for help or backup. Reinforcements that, if they had received it, could have theoretically allowed them to continue to traffic the drugs aboard their sinking ship. So if the guy that you said we should trust, because you're saying that Pete Hegseth, gave him all of this authority to then commit this war crime, if we should believe him and stop bashing him, we're believing him. And y'all's line about how they were radioing for help, he dispels. Should we still listen to him? Admiral Frank Mitch Bradley acknowledged that the 2 survivors of the military's initial strike were in no position to make a distress call in his briefings to lawmakers. That same briefing to lawmakers that Tom Cotton was in. I want to keep reminding you, Tom Cotton was in that briefing, listening to Admiral Bradley talk about how the radioing in is impossible because he was looking at it. In fact, he was the one who authorized that next strike. Keep that in mind as you listen to, again, for some reason, Tom Cotton was sent on the media tour to dispel this.
Drug runners did not appear to have a radio at the time they were killed, and Admiral Bradley said they were not in a position to call for help at the time. So what threat did they pose?
Well, John, the threat they pose is the threat that the boat that was destroyed yesterday posed and that all these other boats posed. They're running drugs in high volumes into the United States that have killed hundreds of Arkansans in recent years and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans. It's not exactly what Admiral Bradley said. He said that they didn't have any intercepts of these 2 drug traffickers trying to radio or call for assistance. That doesn't mean they weren't doing so. It doesn't mean they weren't trying to access communications equipment on the boat, or that they didn't have any of their drug trafficking pals trying to come pick them up.
Did you see any evidence of them trying to use a radio in the video you saw?
Well, I saw lots of evidence of them standing on the boat that had been capsized.
That wasn't my question. Did you see any evidence
trying to get it back up, trying to flip it over?
Did you see any evidence of them trying to use a radio?
No, I didn't, John. No, John, but they were clearly not incapacitated. They were not distressed. One guy took his t-shirt off like he was sunbathing. They were trying to get the boat back up and to continue their mission of spreading these drugs all across America.
Did they get the boat back up?
That's what they were doing, and that's why Admiral Bradley ordered the second strike. Well, no, they didn't, because we killed them, and we were right to kill them, and Admiral Bradley was totally justified in a decision he made.
No, I don't have any evidence of the things that I'm making conclusive statements about. I know none of it. As a matter of fact, the guy who was a part of this said that they couldn't radio it, but they didn't because we killed him and I want more of it. You're the bad guy. You know that, right? Like, you're the bad guy. But as usual, it goes back to them talking about how they were sending drugs to our shores to poison your children. There's the scare tactic again, to mix and jumble up your brain, to no longer think about the fact that they committed war crimes. But they want you to be concerned about your children being fed. They literally use these terms. They're feeding our children, not grown adults, only your children. They're feeding your children drugs. Your children aren't buying drugs. Your uncle isn't buying drugs. Your father isn't buying drugs. Your brother, your cousin, your people aren't buying drugs. They're being fed them. Isn't it weird? These Republicans never talk about black, brown, anyone else, folks that are addicted to drugs. They never talk about how they're being fed drugs. They never talk about how, drugs were fed into certain communities. They never really talk about that. The only people that can get fed drugs are the kids and grandkids of rich white Republicans that are now talking about how they're being fed drugs. Man, why are these narco terrorists doing all this for free? They come and disperse drugs throughout our communities, our white rich communities only now. And when they do so, they do it for free. No one pays them. Your children don't give money for their drugs. It's just dropped on their doorstep in an Amazon package, and they go, "Oh, this is great. Let me snort this. Oh, let me inject that." Maybe your children are junkies. Maybe they're the same thing that you call a bunch of poor folks that are on drugs. Maybe they're that.